Hello, everyone. On behalf of Sotheby's, I would like to welcome you all to a celebration of Black history, Black culture, and Black pride. My name is Kat Almonte. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the head of diversity and inclusion and community engagement here at Sotheby's. So I'm going to kick it off for today. We have a really exciting agenda and program, one that I'm particularly excited about. We're really here to celebrate Black History Month. In the UK, it's really a moment, an opportunity for us to recognize and celebrate the countless individuals from past and present who have made history by defying, influencing, uplifting, and continuing to fight to improve the lives of Black people in the United Kingdom and beyond. I think most of us on this call at this point know that Black art and culture play a significant role in that history. And as a major auction house, Sotheby's recognizes that there has been a pervasive lack of diversity in our industry. I mean, we all see it every day. Sotheby's mission is to promote access to and ownership of exceptional art and luxury objects through transparent and trusted global marketplace. And of course, building a more inclusive community of collectors and the next generation of creatives is a critical component of that vision. As you know, Black artists are experiencing greater exposure in the art market, which will continue to propel pieces for works by members of these historically underrepresented groups. In 2020 alone, we set several significant records for Black artists, including Barkley Hendricks, Betty Saar, Titus Kaphar. The list really goes on and on. That said, there is a great distance to go to achieve full market equity for these artists. Sotheby's envisions a world where everyone has a pathway to high quality and enriching experiences with art and extraordinary objects. We truly believe that art is for everyone. And as leaders in the global art market, we play a pivotal role in transforming that relationship between art and our communities that really enable us to better understand the past and envision a shared, more equitable future. So we really want to play a key role in cultivating and supporting a diverse talent pipeline, not just for Sotheby's, but also for the broader arts community. We're actively building a team that reflects the diversity of the art and artists that come through our doors. And that really can only be achieved with partnerships with exceptional organizations like the Links, like Alpha Kappa, like the AKAs. So I really want to welcome you all along today for our event, but also welcome you along for this journey with us. I'd love to connect on any thoughts or ideas that you might have, recommendations you can make, or simply a resume you can pass along. I really wanted to kick off today by just talking about our commitment as Sotheby's, because again, it's about the real actions and the real work that we're taking, and not just celebrating sort of the art and artists that we're going to see today, but also thinking about how we can really ingrain and change and transform the art industry, and in particular, the auction houses. So in closing, we are deeply committed to make Sotheby's a place that not only sells the world's most extraordinary objects, but one that's truly invested in making the world extraordinary. I really hope that today's events inspire interesting conversations. And if you don't have a relationship with Sotheby's already, we hope this is a good place to start. So thank you so much again for joining us. I have the great pleasure of now passing the virtual mic over to my fabulous colleague, Zena Scott, who's a senior application engineer in our IT department here at Sotheby's. Zena also happens to be a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. I don't know why I'm struggling to say that today, who is our community and technology sponsor for this year's virtual tour. Over to you, Zena.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Zena Scott. I'm an employee of Sotheby's Product and Development IT Applications team, where I'm currently a senior application engineer. I too am a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Omicron Upsilon Omega chapter, which is based in Lower Fairfield County, Connecticut. To give a little history on Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated had its humble beginnings as the vision of 9 college students on the campus of Howard University in 1908. Since then, the sorority has flourished into a globally impactful organization of nearly 300,000 college-trained members, both domestic and international, whose mission is to provide service to all mankind. It gives me great pleasure to have played a leadership role in bringing these two amazing organizations, that of my employer and also my sorority, together today in celebration of London's Black History Month. Thank you for joining.
Hello, good afternoon, and thanks for passing me the virtual baton. Dina, welcome again to the UK Black History Month celebration. My name is Valerie Cooper, and I'm the founding owner of Picture That Consultants. And my partner and I, Anthony Green, are really excited to once again organize this second annual virtual tour of Sotheby's upcoming contemporary and modern African art sale. As others have mentioned, I also want to give a special thanks to the London chapter of the Links Incorporated, because they actually paved the groundwork for this event 1 year ago today when we were in the middle of a pandemic. We pulled it off, and they were indeed a very committed sponsor in 2020. So based on the success of the event last year, we were able to get a community and technology partner for 2021, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I think I got that right. Omicron Upsilon Omega chapter. And I am a proud member of both organizations and serve on each of their respective art committees because of the importance of the arts to the African American, Caribbean, and African cultures, the entire African diaspora. So, a bit of what's in store for today's event. Well, we've expanded our model to include an amazing lineup of participants from both Sotheby's London and New York, and we'll focus on three aspects of tomorrow's upcoming sale. You're going to first hear a little bit about the auction world in general. What is it? What are the mechanics of it, to make sure that we all have some common language? You will then also have an overview of tomorrow's sale. And we'll talk about the fact that it's contemporary and modern art, African art, not tribal, as some of you, are probably more familiar with, the masks, the canes, the objects. This show is one that will focus on contemporary and modern art. And our specialist today will say a bit about that. And then last but not least, you'll have a very exciting guided walking tour on the floor where we'll look at artwork, we'll zoom in on some of the texture and the features of the art close up, and also get to know a little bit more about the artist and the various countries that they are from within the continent of Africa. As you know, Africa is a huge continent with many diverse countries. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over. We're going to kick this tour off now. And I'd like to turn it over to Deanna White, who is the head of Sotheby's Black Employee Resource Group worldwide. Deanna, take it away.
Thank you, Valerie. On behalf of Sotheby's, and wish everyone a happy Black History Month. And we're so excited to have you in our galleries today. The mission of Sotheby's Black Employee Resource Group is to foster networking, mentoring, professional development, and leadership opportunities with focus on the retention, recruitment, learning, and advancement of Black people at this institution. Today, with the Modern and Contemporary Art Department, we're delighted to present highlights of our current auction, which feature masterworks by some of Africa's best artists, including two world-renowned Nigerian modern masters, a recently discovered portrait by Irma Stern, as well as in-demand art by young artists such as Eddie, Kamunga Ilunga, and Abadia. It's also my pleasure to announce that we're doing this in partnership with Faden to celebrate the launch of their new publication, African Artists from 1882 till Now, as well as partnering with the Africa Center, the decades-old charity dedicated to promoting contemporary African culture in London. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Hannah O'Leary, the head of Modern and Contemporary African Art.
Thank you, Deanna. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. As Deanna mentioned, my name is Hannah O'Leary. I am the Director of Modern and Contemporary African Art here at Sotheby's in London, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all into our galleries today. It's a shame not everyone can be here in person. If you are in London, I would recommend that you come and catch us just before we close. Tomorrow morning, we're open from 9 until 12 noon in London, but the whole sale can be viewed online at sotheby's.com/contemporary African. First of all, I want to thank our partners, Alpha Kappa Alpha Limited, Inc.
Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Thank you, Diana. Also my partners in the Black ERG at Sotheby's, Kat Almonte, Zena and Diana. I'm a very proud ally of that group. And also Valerie for bringing us all together for the second year running. As it's been mentioned, October is Black History Month here in the UK. And I'm going to start the tour with two artists from Nigeria who both have links to the UK, just as a nice way to kick off. I'm going to start on my left here with Uzo Ogonu. Uzo Ogonu was an artist who came here in the 1940s at about the age of 13 or 14 to start studying. He's believed to be the first artist of colour to pursue a career in art in the UK. One of the, many of you will have heard of the Windrush generation. After the Second World War, the UK needed to repopulate. We needed people to come here and to occupy jobs in the NHS, jobs that needed to be filled to rebuild the economy. And so members of the Commonwealth were invited to the UK under an Act of Parliament that was passed in 1948, which brought a lot of people of colour to the UK and really changed British culture and history forever. As I mentioned, Uzo is considered the first artist to be one of that generation. And he settled here because he was from Biafra, and right around the time when he was a mature artist and thinking about returning to Nigeria, the Civil War broke out. And so he could not return to his own war-torn country. And so he settled here in the UK, and he became a pioneer of the Black British art movement. He worked alongside people like Lubena Himid, who also originally from Africa. She's from Tanzania and has her first retrospective at the Tate opening next month. People like Eddie Chambers, all of these great British Black artists who really have been overlooked until now, or even still are to some extent. It's a common thread with Black artists worldwide, unfortunately. I should mention that we're very proud as a company to offer and sell more Black art than any other company, certainly more than any other auction house or any other commercial gallery. But we know that a lot more needs to be done on that front. And the African art sales that we hold are only 5 years old. This is our 9th auction. In it, we have over 90 works by African artists from 20 different countries. So we're very proud to showcase them to you here today. I'm going to move on to another Nigerian artist with British connections. This is one of the masterpieces in the sale. Diana, this is an artist called Benamomu, who is probably the best known artist from Nigeria, certainly the best known artist from Nigeria, if not from Africa itself. Diana, if you look here, we're looking at a scene called the Court of the Oba of Benin. Momu was trained as a sculptor first and foremost. His father was a sculptor. And in the early 1940s, he traveled to Benin City to train he was an apprentice to the brass casters of Benin. They were the same people who generations before had made the famous Benin bronzes that were stolen by the British in 1896 and taken to the UK and further abroad. And so this is a depiction of the royal court where those bronzes originally were held. And historically, it's incredibly accurate and important. And it was painted here in the UK, actually. He travelled to the UK in 1944 on a Commonwealth scholarship to study at the Slade. And he returned here again in the 1950s. He was the first African artist to receive a royal commission when he was commissioned to sculpt the Queen. So he was here in 1957. He had studio space in Buckingham Palace. He also shared a larger studio with his British contemporary sculptor called Dick Reed. And in photographs of him in that studio, we can find photos of the artist with this painting unfinished behind him. So we know it was painted in 1957. 57 is interesting also because it was the eve of Nigerian independence in 1960. And that was the same year that the Nigerian National Museum was founded. And Momu was instrumental in the foundation of that museum. He believed that they needed to build a structure in which Nigerian culture and heritage could be preserved for this new nation. And so this must have been on the forefront of his mind when he was doing those sittings at the Queen at Buckingham Palace. He also had one mind back in Nigeria about what does this new freedom, this new independence mean for their country, and how do you protect and incorporate Nigerian heritage into that future as well. So that was what was on his mind when he painted this. We actually found it in a private collection here in the UK, which was incredibly exciting because to my mind, this is a work that could be in a museum.
This work is certainly very interesting, and I think having it in the auction now, especially given the conversation around the restitution of Benin bronzes, and really being able to see Nigerian artists who's painting a scene which, you know, one can only hope to actually have witnessed, especially being of the diaspora, and being able to see such a rich scene out of a period which, you know, has a lot of controversy to say the least, is something that I truly enjoy seeing. How much is this going for?
Oh, good question. It's incredibly well priced. One of the things that we're trying to do is build this market because these works, so many of the works in the auction are museum quality works. They're important pieces by important artists. And you know, working at Sotheby's, that doesn't often happen. Most of our peers in other departments, works of this caliber for other fields would be few and far between. So we're very lucky. And the estimate on this is only £80,000. His work can sell. We have sold his work for over £1 million. So the market is growing and he's very much in demand. But that's where we've placed this. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. But your point is a really, really good one, because imagine this artist, he lands here in the UK, he had spent his entire childhood in Africa, in Nigeria, and he had come fresh from Benin City, where he was indulged in this very rich culture. And he arrived here and he called himself a Benin Prince, which was not true, but he was a master of spin and PR. And it was only when he got here that he ever had access to the Benin bronzes themselves. And that's actually quite an interesting point, that London wasn't, the artist didn't necessarily come to London to pursue a career as a British artist or looking at British history. They came here because the UK was kind of the home of so many of the international treasures. You could go to the museums and galleries and see the greatest art from around the world. And so many artists were drawn here to the UK in those post-war years. He was mixing with a very cosmopolitan crowd. And this was a very contemporary conversation then about restitution, as you say, but also is still relevant today. This was painted in 57. That was, what, 60 years ago, over 60 years ago now. So yeah, great point. It's a really relevant story. On that note, I'm going to take us a segue into the center of the room, actually, to look at a sculpture by the same artist, Ben Momu, only because this actually connects to that story. I mentioned that he was instrumental in the foundation of this new National Museum for Nigeria. And this is a version of a work that he created for that museum. So this is called Amiamu. She is a spirit goddess, and she hangs on the outside of the Nigerian National Museum. That one is, I think, 8 foot tall. This is the later maquette. It became his most well-known, most popular work. So he would make them to commission for his private clients. So this was in a private collection from a French collection, but the family had been in Nigeria during the 1970s and had acquired it directly from the artist. So this is a smaller maquette of this work that stands as the symbol of Nigerian heritage and culture at the National Museum. I think I might leave in Momu now. I could talk about him for like an hour or two. And we're lucky we have so many of his great works in our sale.
Has there been a lot of interest in his sculptures?
He, as I said at the beginning, he's known for his sculpture first and foremost. Actually, his painting has made more money at auction, but you know, it always kind of chops and changes as we go on. So, no, there's been a lot of interest in this sculpture, and as I said, it's a version. Quite a few versions were made. This sculpture has sold at auction for up to £300,000.
Wow! So I will certainly be watching this one.
Not bidding?
Not yet.
I might leave West. Actually, let's talk about this West African painting before we leave that part of the continent. This is a work by Yusuf Grillo. Grillo was like Nwomu, he was soon after Nwomu, considered a master of Nigerian modernism. He was more rooted in Nigeria. He didn't have the international career that Nwomu had. But what I like the parallel between this and the Court of the Oba of Benin is that here we again have a modern artist telling a story of new Nigeria, but incorporating traditional heritage. So what we're looking at here is the preparations for a masquerade called Ayo. And this is the most famous masquerade dance in Lagos, which is the economic capital, the largest city in Nigeria. It's one of the largest cities in the world. And this is a traditional Yoruba masquerade. So this group have all been initiated into the Ayo family. They're denoted by the color of their caps because there are different members. And they're preparing to parade through the streets of Lagos Island, which is the oldest part of the city. This is quite a very, very well-known masquerade that takes place on the death of a chief. So this is a very recognizable piece of Yoruba heritage and really a masterwork by a master artist. I'm sorry to say that we actually lost Grillo this year. He passed away due to COVID. And sadly, we've lost so many kind of masters of African art that way. But we're very, very privileged to be offering this work for sale.
I really enjoyed this piece, I think, just because as a student, you're exposed to so many masks which have actually been a part of these ceremonies. And so now to actually, see an intimate moment in the ceremony where, he's being passed the staff and, you can almost imagine the energy, the synergy that's happening in that moment, and which is something completely different than what you get when you look at a mask, which is, very structured, very purposely done. Whereas this, you have to, feel it and kind of envision what it would like to be there.
Right.
So just out of interest, what is the estimate for this?
So this is actually the highest valued work in the sale. So the estimate is 180 to 240,000 pounds. That is, we're expecting it to break the world record for the artist. It really is the best work by him that's been on the market for quite some time. First time he's been offered at Sotheby, so we're excited about that. We'll see what happens tomorrow, right? We don't know, we can't predict the future, but I'm very, very excited about this one. I think you make a really nice point that actually is a common thread throughout the sale. What's happening, we cover a lot of ground in this auction. Not only are we covering the African continent, which is huge, it's 54 countries, but also almost 100 years of art history. And if you think of the 20th century in Africa, and also the ties between Africa and the UK, it's a very turbulent history. There are a lot of independence movements going on, especially in the mid-20th century, from kind of 1957 in Ghana through to the early 1960s. And so a lot of these artists who might have been trained in a Western style are really trying to adapt that training into what does that mean for my country and our modernism? How do I write a new aesthetic, a new visual language that incorporates not just my, how they paint in the West, but also where we come from, what makes it Nigerian. So I think that's what's really interesting about what he's doing here. This is, at the time was a very contemporary painting, but dealing with an ages-old practice as well. And also that point about the masks, we all go and see these masks in the museums. They're beautiful objects, but they're isolated and behind a vitrine. This is that culture come to life. This is how those objects are practiced and used. So yeah, no, it's a lovely bridge between the kind of Western contemporary art world and that kind of African heritage too. I'm going to go backwards if we can. I'm going to take us to South Africa for a moment. This is a very, very exciting find. This is a painting by Irma Stern. She is the most famous South African artist. She's actually one of the highest selling female artists in the world. She was a white lady. She's Jewish. She was born to German parents in South Africa. One point to make maybe is that while this market is developing and growing, the fact of the matter is that the white artists, particularly in South Africa, had opportunities during the 20th century that their black counterparts didn't have. And so we do see a lot of the top prices historically being with white artists. That's something that, as great as these artists are, we're also trying to level the playing field. And as we get more exposure for the artists, their Black contemporaries, and as we're engaging more with African clients and collectors, we're seeing that gap narrow. But her work has sold for up to $5 million at auction. This is a painting that she did in 1942, so the war is going on. She had spent her childhood traveling between South Africa and Germany, and she actually studied under Max Pechstein in Germany. She was one of the founding members of the November Group. So she's really at the forefront of what's happening in the European art movements at the time. She was represented by people like the Gerlich Gallery in Germany, who represented Matisse. And she knew people like Jacob Epstein, who rated her work very highly. So she really was incredibly well known and famous in her lifetime. And she traveled a lot in Europe whenever she could, but during the war, being a Jewish lady, she really didn't feel like she could return. So instead, she turned to the African continent to satisfy her wanderlust. And she went to Zanzibar in 1939. She was single and alone. She went by herself. And in 1942, she went to the Belgian Congo for the first time, which is where this was painted. This is a portrait of a Watusi noble lady. And we knew that when we were offered it for sale. What's really interesting about this, and Valerie, I'm going to mention you here, is that we had an intern at Sotheby's. We had a wonderful colleague at Sotheby's last year, Kamika Higa, who's now an independent curator. And she's from Rwanda, which is where the Watusi live. And so we showed her this image and she was able to identify the sitter, which was really, really exciting. So the sitter in this painting is Princess Emma, who was the sister of the king of the Watusi at the time. It's amazing to think that Irma Stern both made that journey, that intrepid journey to Kigali, but also had access to the royal family to be able to paint them. The Watusi had a really storied history at the time. Emma's father also was a king, but he had been sent into exile by the British, or not by the British, I'm sorry, by the Belgians, because Rwanda at that time fell under Belgian Congo. And so her brother had taken the throne and she had remained behind with him. She was renowned for her beauty. I think you can see that in this portrait. She really is stunningly elegant and gorgeous. And here you can see some details that Irma has chosen to paint. So the glass necklace that she's wearing, and also this remarkable headpiece, which is only worn by ladies of the royal family. And this is made of cow horn. So this painting was exhibited in Congo in 1942. She had an exhibition before she left, and then she exhibited her Congolese work in Johannesburg and in Cape Town to great acclaim. And she published a book about her travels and her paintings in Congo. And what we found was that this painting was listed in the exhibition in Congo, but was not listed in the exhibitions in South Africa, which means that it was sold in Congo, one of the very few paintings that she sold there. And from there, it made its way to Belgium, where it was hidden in a private collection for all these years until we were offered it for sale this year, which was such an exciting find because she's probably one of the most written about artists from South Africa. But this painting is completely undocumented after that 1942 exhibition. So a really exciting find. The estimate is 120 to 180,000 pounds. But at the previous, there's one other painting of this, of Emma that we know of, and that painting sold for 1.1 million pounds. So potentially this could do very well.
That is absolutely fascinating. And while I do know Irma Stern's work, just having visited South Africa and just being familiar because she is prolific, but this sitter in particular really captivated my attention, in particular because she is from the Watutsi tribe. And so essentially we're seeing, generations of an African royal family. It's now represented in a portrait of one of their, famous, beauties, renowned leaders. And Irma Stern has treated her in such a dignified way, which during this time period, given what, both women are dealing with what's going on in Europe with the Jewish population, and then what's happening in Congo and Rwanda with the Belgians, you almost have to wonder, what did these women talk about while
Absolutely, that's such a great point, because here was this, Irma herself, I don't know if you've ever seen photos, she was short and obese and not easy to get along with, and yet she had this amazing sense of, I don't want to call it adventure, but she needed to travel and she needed to get out of the confines of her hometown in Cape Town. And she painted people from around the world. She painted portraits of white, black, South Africans and Congolese people, but in a way that wasn't with that ethnographic slant, which was so common at that time. You know, to me, the fact that we could identify her, first and foremost, she's a real woman with real feelings, with real family, with real problems that were going on in the Congo at that time. And I really think she's one of the greatest female artists of anywhere, not just limited to Africa. I'd love to see a retrospective of her work here in Europe, and particularly of the portraits, because often the sitters are just as interesting as the artist. Okay, where will we go next? We've got a couple of more Mwomu. So Mwomu is the most represented artist in the sale. So we have this beautiful portrait of a lady in blue. We don't know who the sitter is. He was quite prolific and loved to paint young women. The estimate on that is 70 to 90,000 pounds. And next to it is another work by Mwomu called Negritude, which is probably his best known series. He would tackle a series or a subject several times or many times over his lifetime. So negritude was a term that comes actually from the Pan-African movement in Paris in the 1930s that he would kind of threw himself into when he got to Paris. And then you can see this was painted in 1987. So it was a subject or a topic that he was thinking about in painting throughout his lifetime. We have a painting by Olaku, another Nigerian artist. This is a scene from northern Nigeria, very different culturally and topographically to Lagos, where he lives today. Some more Nigerian paintings. Nigeria is very well represented. It's one of the largest and fastest growing markets on the continent. So a more historic work by Akinola Lashikan, 1955, one of the earlier works in the sale. This is a traditional market scene. I've had collectors say it takes them back to their childhood. This kind of magics them back to the village. This is Benimwomu, 1962. Slightly later down here, Gani, more of a visual or a graphic artist or design. Very excited about this. This is the first time we've offered him for sale here at Sotheby's. And then a slight segue to the Congo, with the Congo being the center of Africa, the largest country, I think, in Africa, and really the kind of beating heart of African modernism. This was painted in 1962 by someone called Falelo. Again, a Sotheby's debut, so we're excited to offer him for the first time. But you can see where there's overlap between, as you mentioned already, Diana, the African traditional art, carvings, masks, then where it meets Western modernism, then when it's repackaged back to Congo, where Congolese painting began with missionaries teaching local artists to paint on canvas. And all of those elements kind of combine in this beautiful, perfectly formed painting.
And I also just enjoy seeing artwork from the continent during this time period, just given with how many works from Picasso that we were absolutely inundated with. And here you can see exactly where he got his influence from. And, you know, not only is, you could essentially say maybe Picasso uses as a reference picture, but here actually is something which is a masterpiece from the Congo, which is, as you said, the heart of Africa.
Well, that's a really good point, because I already mentioned that Mwomu had to come to the UK to see the Benin bronzes after his apprenticeship with the Benin bronze casters. So really that's what's happening at this time. All of these pieces were showcased in our museums, in the British Museum. We thought we had a right to do that. And people would travel from all over. And so the modernists like Picasso, he would always he denied for such a long time that he had any influence from Africa. When actually you look at his paintings, you can find that the actual masks that he was copying in those museums, but he was claiming it was his own individual genius. It's a very good point. Actually, Mwomu said that. Mwomu was accused of the Anyanwu sculpture we looked at earlier, the bronze. He was accused of copying Adriana, the tall Giacometti. And he took such offense to this, and he said, "No, Giacometti stole from my ancestors. Yeah, he's stealing my art." So yeah, no, absolutely, that's something that comes up time and time again. It's fascinating that we really didn't have a platform for contemporary art from Africa until very, very recently, certainly outside Africa. But these movements, these influences were happening throughout the 20th century. We have artists that never left their home countries in Africa, but they were still reading books, they were still interested in what was going on internationally in the art world and the movements that were happening there as well. So you cannot write them out of a global art history. This is probably the best known artist in Ghana. This is Ablade Glover. He is, again, the father of Ghanaian modernism. Here we have quite a richly painted and very thick with impasto. I think Adriana's going to zoom in just now. But it is a market scene. And if anyone's been to West Africa and been to the markets, maybe they'll recognize it. I think to most eyes, most Western eyes, it's quite an abstract scene. But you can see that these very thickly painted splodges of paint are the people and the chaos and the roofs. These rectangles are the roofs of the stalls in the marketplace. He's always an incredibly popular artist. People who come to Sotheby's for another reason and come across our exhibitions are always fascinated by Ablade Glover's painting.
I mean, you can certainly spend all day looking at this, just from the way that he's been able to use the paint to build the depth and the texture. And you can see just the incredible intricacy where you are looking, at a bird's eye view of a market, but your eye is being drawn towards the back, towards the sides, towards the front, and you can feel the energy that is going on, and the activities and the sales. And just, to my mind, I'm just thinking about the stories which are probably being shared.
Right, I can hear the noise of the market, the conversations that are being had, the gossip that's being made, the arguments that are being had. Yeah, I can totally see pick up on that too. No, he's always a very, very popular artist in our sales. I might talk about the women, one thing that, as well as diversity within what we sell at Sotheby's, one thing we've been working on very hard is representing more women, more female artists. And we've got two of my favorite female artists here. So this is Evelyn Nicodemus, and she's from Tanzania. She's actually now living in Scotland, and she's a writer and teacher as well as a painter, but she's a painter first and foremost. I had the honor of meeting her this week. This painting was painted in 1989, so quite a historic work, and I was quite surprised to find that she's only just had her first ever commercial gallery show here in the UK, having lived here for many, many years. So thankfully now there are opportunities for these artists who, to my mind, are important artists. Finally, there are opportunities for them in the marketplace too, which maybe weren't there before.
And what's the estimate on this?
This is very reasonably priced. Now you're testing me. It is £5,000 to £7,000.
Oh wow!
She actually, she also had there was an art fair here in London called the 154 Contemporary African Art Fair, and all of her work at that fair was sold out. So I hope some of those people are going to come and bid at auction. And then we have another, one of the greatest female artists from the continent, and one of the most important artists from Mozambique, Bertina Lopes. And she's known for this very graphic abstract design where she uses the lines to paint her paintings. But she was displaced during the civil war in Mozambique. So she relocated first to Lisbon and finally settled in Italy, where she enjoyed a successful career. But again, we haven't really seen her secondary market take off or the auction prices take off. These are still very reasonably priced. I think the estimates are in the region of £5,000 to £7,000 each. I think, for paintings of this quality and scale by an important artist, they should be worth 10 times that, if not more. So that's where we are in the market. Finally, things are happening. People are looking at these auctions. We obviously have a great data collector base of people who've been collecting for a long time. But what we have to do is bring these artists into the mainstream. So this is an artist who should be in museum collections, and that hasn't really happened yet. So we're always talking to curators and collectors about what's the next step? How can we elevate African art and make sure it's in line with what's happening in Europe and America as well? Do we have much time left?
I think we have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. We're going to race through the rest of it. I hope people are thinking of questions, because we're definitely going to take some questions at the end. Maybe I can talk about Snow River Goosey. to my mind, there are a handful of artists who are really the pioneers of African modernism, and from each corner of the continent. And so Skunda Bogosian is an artist from Ethiopia. He, again, common theme, he traveled to Europe in order to pursue his studies. So he arrived in Paris in the 1940s, where he immersed himself in Black Paris with the Harlem Renaissance artists who were there at the time, and poets and philosophers and writers. He was introduced, we know he met Picasso. So to your point, this idea that Picasso knew nothing about Africa or African artists is not correct. And through a South African artist, Gerard Sokoto, he was introduced to Wilfredo Lam from Cuba. And equally, Wilfredo Lam was very interested in African art. But Lam had a huge influence on his work, and I think you can see that in this painting from 1967. Skunda actually he received an invitation to teach in the US for 1 year. And when he was in the US, civil war broke out in Ethiopia. And so he chose to settle in the US and didn't go back to Ethiopia. He became the professor of painting at Howard University, where he remained for the rest of his career. And he had a huge influence on African American artists for several generations after that. So those ties, like I say, you can't really look at Africa by itself. There are always ties between Africa, North America, Africa and Europe, Africa and South Asia, and dialogue going both ways. You know, not just Western artists influencing African artists, but also the other way around. And this is a really nice example of that too.
Definitely, because when I look at this, there are so many things that which it reminds me of, and now I can see, you know, where these artists were influenced from. Even thinking contemporary artists working today, Julie Maratu, an Ethiopian background, you know, her works are phenomenal, almost, you know, grid-like structures, and you can see that in this. You can see what he was trying to achieve by making the different geometric shapes and using that to develop his figures. So this is, for me, this is a very exciting work that I'd love to see hanging up in a museum.
I love that you mentioned Julie Maratu because she is the highest selling artist from East Africa. She's again one of the highest selling female artists. I would imagine that, you know, almost anyone who knows anything about art in the world has heard of Julie. They might not even know she's from Ethiopia, and they certainly don't know anything else about Ethiopian artists. But she always talks about Skunda Bogosian. Skunda Bogosian and his contemporary artwork, who are the two kind of cornerstones of Ethiopian art history. And she is really interested in Ethiopian art and artists, and she often talks about them when she talks about her influences. So that's a really great point.
And what's the estimate for this?
This one is 40 to 60,000 pounds. So again, these estimates are not crazy expensive for works that are by really important artists that could be in a museum and will be one day. This at that price, I think, would be a great buy. I love this work. And he is an artist who's in museum collections. Like I said, being at Howard, being in DC, there's some great works in the Smithsonian's collection, for example, and in the Howard University collection as well. I think break there for questions, is that right?
Yeah, it is indeed a great time for questions. What an amazing tour you all have just given us. I could spend the rest of the day just being absorbed in the history, the culture, the fabulous palettes that are behind you. The room is certainly moving in a mighty way. We do have a number of questions in the comment section here. So I'm going to read a few. And the first has to do with changes in the African art market. So I think you mentioned, Hannah, that this is your 9th sale, is that right?
That's right, yeah, 9th sale in 5 years.
In 5 years. And the first one debuted, was it 2016?
We debuted in 2017, May 2017. So, I mean, for those of you who don't know me, I've been working in this field for over 15 years. So I started the African art, the first international sales of African art with another auction house, which I ran for 10 years. And then I joined Sotheby's in 2016. So that was correct, but our first auction was in 2017.
Awesome. So the question has to do with the changes in the market over the past 5 years. What are some of the top 2 or 3 shifts that you've witnessed?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure I can summarize it that quickly. The last 5 years have been, we've really seen an accelerated growth. So I think Sotheby's entering the market was a huge part of that. That was a big tick from a blue chip company, to be invested in this market and in that audience as well, which is equally as important. There have been, and part of that is really just providing more platforms for African artists. So there was nowhere really that we would sell African artists in our contemporary sales, but they were few and far between, and we didn't have dedicated expertise that could help elevate them, right? So that was a big part in having these sales. Other things that have happened alongside that are the establishment of 154, the Contemporary African Art Fair, which I already mentioned. That opened for the first time in London in 2013, and then followed by editions in New York and in Marrakesh. And then to that final kind of point is that the development of the market on the African continent. So we're seeing more galleries, commercial galleries open in Africa, and also big art fairs. So you have the Johannesburg Art Fair, the Cape Town Art Fair, the Art X Lagos Art Fair. These have all just developed in the last 5 to 10 years. And those are all stimulating the market in Africa, which I think is really key to making sure that this market is developed and sustainable, but also bringing it to a wider international audience and making sure they're part of that global discourse too. I hope that answers the question.
That answers it completely. Thank you for that. And I think I've even noticed over the past 5 years, when attending art fairs like the Armory Show in New York and Basel and South Florida, there just is such a large influx now of African artists. And quite frankly, they may be from Africa, but a lot of them have studios in Paris and in Brooklyn. And, they're very global and dynamic in terms of where they practice, and they're aggressive in terms of where they're selling their works, which is a little unlike, a lot of the, I think, American artists. So that was very interesting for me to learn.
Well, I think that's been an age-old situation for African artists, is that until now, at least, you kind of, if you wanted to pursue a career as an artist, you might have to look overseas. I think someone like Elan Sui, who's based between Nigeria and Ghana,
is everywhere,
but he has big galleries overseas that represent him, so they make sure that he has an international audience. But I don't know, Deanna, if you made it to Frieze last week, but to Valerie's point, we're seeing more and more African artists in those mainstream fairs with those big galleries. It's not niche anymore. You don't have to go to an African gallery.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of which, I think the other aspect of the market that has lowered barriers and almost erased borders entirely, of course, is the internet. I mean, that's why we're in London right now for lunch with you all, right? Another question is, it has to do with the age of the pandemic and how has the role of the online auction shifted?
I feel like Deanna might be able to answer that.
And Deanna, what area? I know Hannah's heading up the African art market, but you're in a different area of Sotheby's, aren't you? What area do you represent? Tell us a little bit about that and your experience with the auction, the online auction world.
So I am a part of the luxury division, specifically on the fashions and accessory team, which sells high-end handbags such as Hermes, and then also the rare sneakers, the Kanye West shoes that sold for over £1 million.
Oh my!
So a plug for there. And we also currently have Michael Jordan's first real signature shoe, the Airship, which is also being sold with a $1 million estimate on it in our sale in Las Vegas with MGM. So lots of firsts for our team. But the way our team came about was actually because of online sales. So originally we started out with sort of onboarding other departments onto our online sales to really get them up and running and to be able to sell during the pandemic. So we have a system that was entirely built for us, luckily. Everything goes onto the system. We have a lot of experts working in the background to make sure everything goes up properly with their estimates. And it's really sort of putting the auction room online, where you still have people working in the background to put together, the broadcast that you can now see. So it's just, it's really fascinating. And it has been a bit of a shift to get everyone on board with technology. But that's with everything in life. And the pandemic just kind of further further brought it along even faster. And it's bringing a lot of departments a lot of success. I can tell you for my department, we really started having some significant records once our sales were getting that visibility online. And it's fun to watch other department sales and track the modern contemporary African auctions online. And if you love prices and you love data, we were putting everything out there for people to see now, which is something which auction houses traditionally in the past have not done.
Yeah, I think, Deanna, that's a really good point, because in your field, it made so much sense to be online. In the fine art side, you had to drag us kicking and screaming to have online auctions. We were very old-fashioned. We wanted, the in-person experience. But they've been really successful. They bring us so many new clients, so many international clients, and a much younger collector as well. So it's really the average age of the buyers in our sale has come right down, which is exciting too. So yeah, no, online is working really, really well for us too.
And absent of online throughout the pandemic, sales would have primarily ceased because places were closed. I mean, last year, I remember when we had our virtual walkthrough, I believe you all had just opened your doors and were returning back to work. So it has saved the day for lots of businesses. There's a question in the chat about one of the artists, Fabian Kamulu. And the question is, can you tell us a little bit about the background of the artists, where they're from, and a little bit about more about the career?
Wow. Okay. Now you're putting me on the spot. I think you mean his name is Fabian Mpagi Kamudu.
Yeah.
He's known as Mpagi. He's one of the most important artists from Uganda, and we have two remarkable examples of his work in this auction. Sadly, they're not in this room. Otherwise, I would show you them, but they're on my Instagram if anyone wants to find them there. They are huge, and they were exhibited in Vienna at a major show of modern Ugandan art. And at a time which was interesting, when Uganda was really pulling out of that whole horrific Idi Amin regime. And so these works are, I think it was 1992, and the artist was really dealing with this kind of, again, engaging with Ugandan history and culture in the symbolism that he uses, but also in a very positive way in this really exciting time in Ugandan history where they feel like they had had so many years of colonization followed by so many years of this horrific regime that finally Uganda was getting back on its feet, and that art and culture could be a big part of that as well. So no, those are two remarkable works in the sale. Estimates again for pieces that really are really important works of Ugandan art history, I think both the estimates are $5,000. So yeah, if I had huge walls, I would be buying those, snapping those up and putting them on them. They are really amazing. So yeah, thank you for the question. They're two.
All right, that question actually came from Jen Distance. Thank you for that, Jen. And Kim McCoy, looks like we have another couple of questions and a minute or two left. So let's see if we could get another one or two questions in. So in the age of, sorry, we've read that one already. What you talked a lot about, Hannah, the different parts of Africa that these works are actually from. You talked about West African art versus South African. How are these artists located? How does the artwork get selected? Do you kind of go on a shopping spree of sorts throughout the continent? I mean, like, how do you decide what to bring back for the show? Somebody has to do it, right? Is that you?
I wish I went on a shopping spree. I mean, we actually source the work for sale everywhere. So just because it's a Nigerian painting doesn't mean it came from Nigeria. The thing is that these works date back decades. They may have been taken out of the country many, many years ago. This is a market that really didn't exist more than 10 or 15 years ago. So a lot of pieces were collected for very reasonable prices by very modest people. Often people who found themselves in Africa for not a long time. So often works come from collections of missionaries or people who worked for Médecins Sans Frontières or diplomats who might have just been in Africa for a few years, decided to buy a souvenir to take back with them. And that turned out now to be, you know, a valuable artwork. So we can find them. We've literally found African art in China, I don't know, the Philippines,
Brazil.
Canada, Mexico, really in the most unusual or unlikely places. I do travel to Africa as much as I can. Obviously, the last 18 months or so have been frustrating in that respect.
Right.
But for example, I've just come back from a very successful trip to Nigeria and Ghana. And so we do have some works that originated from Nigeria and Ghana. And I hope to get to Southern Africa before the end of the year as well.
Terrific. Well, ladies, this has been a wonderful tour. We are down to the last few minutes. If you would like to both share some parting remarks, I will give you the opportunity to do so at this time. But I will say on behalf of Picture That Consultants, we are just absolutely thrilled to have partnered with Sotheby's and Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Omicron Upsilon Omega chapter on this journey. So thank you again so much. And Hannah and Deanna, I'll let you both take it away.
Go first.
So I just want to thank everybody for spending some time with us, and I hope that you enjoyed the tour. One of my missions as chair of the Black Employee Research Group is to really show how inviting Sotheby's can be. And you know, these auctions are just one way, but if you go and you look on our website, there are fantastic works, which, you know, these are your last chance that you're going to get to see before they're put away in your private collection. And so for works by African artists and African American artists in particular, it's really critical that people are aware of what's going on and to see the actual celebration and, you know, the monetary value which is attributed to it. So when you have time, get online, check out the full sale of the auction. It closes tomorrow. So if you are ever so inclined, place your bids.
Deanna, thank you so much. I want to echo a lot of what you've just said. Sotheby's is free and open to the public every day of the week. And those are our auction rooms here in London and New York. We have our contemporary African art auctions currently take place twice a year in October and March. But any day of the week, you're going to come into Sotheby's and find something interesting. And we encourage everyone to come in. So definitely everyone is welcome. As Deanna said, there's a lot to find online, not just the auctions and the private sales that we're offering, but also lots of editorial, lots of background to the work that we're doing and the artists that we sell. I am going to plug this auction. We are an online only auction. So that means that we're accepting bids online. It's a timed auction. It's open for less than 24 hours. So we close bidding tomorrow at 3 p.m. London time, which is 10 a.m. in New York and the East Coast. If people want to bid, they are so welcome to do so. We just need, if it's your first time bidding, we just need a little bit of ID. So I'd encourage you to do that sooner rather than later. Everyone is welcome to reach out to me. You can find all of my details at sotheby's.com/contemporary African, where you'll also find my colleagues in the department and all of the lots that we're offering for sale as well. I think I'll end it there. Thank you, everyone.